Pleasure to see you all again. This is the Thursday, February 8th, 2024 business meeting for the Little Hoover Commission. As is our practice, notice has been issued with respect to instructions for the public on how to access this particular business meeting and how to participate should they decide to do so. Looking at the agenda, it appears as though pursuant to the amendments to Bagley-Keene, we also have a physical presence at 925L Conference Room where members of the public can attend should they choose to do so. Having said all of that, why don't I turn it over to you, Ethan, so we can start the meeting, start the agenda.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So with your permission, I'm actually going to take one agenda item out of order and begin with the last item on the agenda, which is to introduce our newest staff member. Commissioners will remember that Dan Harris-McCoy attended the last meeting, but we didn't really have time to introduce him as it was a hearing. He will also, of course, be attending the March 28th in-person meeting, so commissioners will be able to meet him then, but I thought perhaps I'd introduce him now and give him a chance to say a few words. Dan came to us from an academic career. He was a classics professor at the University of Hawaii, has written books, was a Fulbright scholar, very distinguished background, recently relocated with his family back to his hometown of Davis, and we were lucky enough to snag him, and he has already proven to be an excellent addition to the staff. So, Dan, I don't know if you want to say a few words and add something to that.
Well, thank you very much. Good morning, commissioners. It's great to be with you and to be working on behalf of the commission. Ethan just gave my resume in a nutshell, but just to recap it, I was a classics professor for 15 years. I did my BA at Reed College, a Fulbright in India. I gather there is an India connection on the commission, so I'm excited to find out more about that. And then a PhD at the University of Pennsylvania. I got my doctorate right at the start of the Great Recession, so I bounced around from one-year job to one-year job at a lot of great universities, University of Southern California, a number of schools back east before landing a tenured position at the University of Hawaii, where I was for 10 years. Believe it or not, we left behind paradise and came back home to California. And basically, I wanted to move into something that combined research with public service. And I don't think I could have landed anywhere better than the Little Hoover Commission. I am absolutely delighted to be here. The work that we're doing is very important, and I look forward to contributing to it. So thanks very much for having me, and I look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you, Daniel. Before I move too far, Commissioner Sidley looked as though she had something she wanted to say. No, and I thought I saw earlier that Commissioner Byer had a hand up.
Commissioner Garcetti has his hand up, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Garcetti, please.
Well, welcome, Dan. I may call you Dan. I take it you go by Dan rather than Daniel, but whatever. Welcome. I feel a little close to you because I was associated with Reed through my wife who attended Reed. So I'm going to give her your name. I think there's a little age difference, so you probably didn't go to school together, but welcome. Indeed.
Thank you so much. That's wonderful.
Thank you, and welcome, Daniel. Ethan.
Very good. Well, thank you. We may hear more from Dan later, as he was the principal author of the scoping memo on AI. So if there are questions, we may talk with him more later this meeting. So, Mr. Chairman, with that, we'll move on to, we'll now go back to agenda order and take item number 1, which is public comment. If the staff can put up the instructions for public comment. If you're a member of the public and you wish to make public comment and you've accessed the meeting via Zoom, please use the raised hand function. If you have phoned into the meeting and you wish to make public comment, you should email us immediately at littlehoover@lhc.ca.gov. Just give us your phone number. That's really all we need so that we know who to unmute. So that's littlehoover@lhc.ca.gov. But the much better way is to use the raised hand function if you are joined via Zoom. In keeping with the Commission's long practice, public comment is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, and the commissioners will be able to hear you, but not to see you while you make public comment. And so with that, we will open the public comment session, and I will ask Shara, I believe that I see no raised hands. Is that correct, Shara?
That is correct.
And do we have any emails that we have received?
We do not have any emails.
Okay. So we'll just wait one moment here and let members of the public raise their hands if they wish, but if not, I believe we have no public comment. I still see no raised hands. So, Mr. Chairman, I believe we can close out the public comment session, and with your permission, move on to item number 2 on the agenda, which is adoption of business meeting minutes. The first, we skipped the business meeting minutes in December, so we have to go all the way back and would seek approval of the business meeting minutes from the September 28th meeting, which begin on page 2 of Commissioners' packets.
Yes, thank you. With respect to the September 28th, 2023 minutes, are there any changes or corrections or discussion? Seeing none, is there a motion to adopt?
I so move.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And second. Motion seconded. Call the question. Take the roll, please.
Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Mr. Vice Chairman?
Aye.
Commissioner Eriner?
Aye.
Commissioner Byer?
Aye.
Assemblymember Chen? Commissioner Garcetti?
Aye.
Commissioner Hernandez? Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
Senator Min? Assemblymember Ortega? Commissioner Sidley?
Yes.
And Senator Wilk. And Mr. Chairman, the motion carries.
Thank you very much. The next item has to do with the December 14th, 2023 meetings or minutes from that meeting. Any corrections, discussion, or questions with respect to the minutes? Seeing none, is there a motion to adopt the minutes?
I'll second it.
Motion made and seconded. Call the roll, please, Ethan.
Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Mr. Vice Chairman?
Aye.
Commissioner Eriner?
Aye.
Commissioner Byer?
Aye.
Assemblymember Chen? Commissioner Garcetti?
Yes.
Commissioner Hernandez? Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Senator Min? Assemblymember Ortega? Commissioner Sidley?
Yes.
Senator Wilk. Mr. Chairman, that motion carries as well.
Well, thank you very much, Commissioners. Next is item number 3, Ethan.
Correct. So if we can move on to item number 3, Commissioners, this is the draft report stemming from our hearing in Long Beach last fall. This report assesses the degree of implementation of our past recommendations on labor trafficking, human trafficking for labor exploitation. This report involves both the hearing in Long Beach and subsequent outreach we made to state agencies for written submissions. Ashley organized this hearing and was the principal author of the report, so I'll ask her to briefly present the report, and then the commission can discuss. Ashley?
Thank you, Ethan, and good morning, Chair Nava and commissioners. In 2020, the commission issued 3 reports on strengthening California's response to labor trafficking. Together, these reports offered 10 recommendations to coordinate a statewide response to combat all forms of human trafficking, detecting labor trafficking, helping survivors recover, and bringing traffickers to justice. Last year, the Commission held a public hearing and sought additional input from 5 state agencies to learn about what progress has been made towards implementing its recommendations. This follow-up report presents Commission findings and highlights opportunities for implementation going forward. Lawmakers enacted reforms to partially implement 2 of the Commission's recommendations to increase public awareness and equally address all forms of child human trafficking. Lawmakers also made several attempts to build a coordinated statewide response to trafficking, but none have been successful thus far. As a result, 8 of the 10 recommendations have not been implemented at all. The need for an organized, comprehensive state response to trafficking has only increased since the Commission released its initial reports. Some victim service organizations now report serving an increasing number of clients over the past 2 years. This report serves as a reminder of the work that still needs to be done to ensure that California has a strong stance in the fight against labor trafficking. Thank you, Commissioners.
Yep. Thank you for that presentation. Let me open it up to the commissioners. Any questions or comments with respect to this report? Find it on page 8 of your package. Any criticisms? Commissioner Byer.
Commissioner Byer, you are muted.
David, you're muted.
I thought the report was comprehensive and well done. However, it was frustrating to read because it's like a tree falling in the forest and no one noticing. So it's a question for staff and the commissioners who were so active in crafting these recommendations. What's going on behind the scenes that's getting in the way of doing things that make a lot of sense?
Well, Commissioner Byer, there have been bills introduced, but unfortunately, in many cases, they have not passed. In one case, there was a bill to create a unit within DIR to pursue human trafficking. That bill actually passed the legislature unanimously, but was vetoed by Governor Newsom, who said in his veto message that he felt that unit belonged in a different department, the Department of Civil Rights. The legislature since then considered 2 other bills to create such a unit. They did not pass last year. There is now pending legislation again to try again, which we will support. So sometimes these are, to use the governor's phrase, iterative efforts. The fundamental biggest recommendation, I would say, was to create an anti-human trafficking council. And unfortunately, there has been no particular movement on that, I think largely for budgetary reasons, although we just haven't had success in pushing bills on that. But we are actually right now, we are working with various legislative offices. I'm going to talk about this later in the implementation update to introduce bills this year. And I'm hopeful that there will be some bills on this topic. But I don't have a particular answer as to what is why those bills have not already passed, or in the one case they didn't, were vetoed. But we're going to keep trying and keep moving forward. And this report, I think, only puts this issue back at the forefront for us in terms of talking to legislative offices.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ethan, let me ask, when we were putting the report together, we had some successful meetings with the community-based organizations. I remember the meeting that we had in Los Angeles, and that room was full. We also had a presentation from the city attorney. And I'm wondering whether or not you or staff have received any feedback from the CBOs as to their sense of why there hasn't been more progress.
I don't know. I'm going to ask Tamar to address this, and as she was the principal author of these reports. I would say that we certainly have had conversations with those organizations, and their feedback on the initial reports was extremely positive. I don't know that they have provided additional feedback on the subsequent fate of pending bills, but I think that in general, their feedback on our work on this issue has been very positive. Tamar, do you want to add anything to that?
Me, did I get it? Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I mean, we've definitely been in contact with a number of the organizations that we worked with during the study. They've said that our report has helped them have conversations and has sparked interest in the topic. But I think they're just continuing to face the similar challenges. They've supported the same legislation that we have. And so I don't know, I think they'll continue to do so.
Commissioner Aaron.
So yeah, there might be 2 factors, and I'm just guessing along kind of with all of you. One of them is the pandemic, right? The original hearings were done before the pandemic. The pandemic hits and throws us all into chaos, right? But the second thing is, if you think about it, legislative membership has almost turned over 100% since we did the first hearings, with the latest being that the pro tem, who was the first speaker, if I remember, at the hearing in San Diego, was is now running for governor, but having said that, just stepped down as pro tem. And so I just, it's kind of like sometimes you just have to start all over, because with the changeovers in the legislature, it's really hard to think about all of the different topics that these new members are getting themselves involved in, and maybe there needs to be some re-education and stuff like that. I just don't know.
Yeah, Dion, have you seen or heard of any member of the legislature that's sort of standing out as a person who would champion?
Well, there was one of the Rubio, right?
One of the Rubios was right.
Was it Susan? And is she the one who's is she the one who's running for Congress? One of the Rubios is running for Congress. I just don't know which one. But that was kind of the last, besides the pro tem showing significant interest, and then of all things, not moving forward on the one recommendation we really wanted her to do, which was this whole thing about so many agencies being involved and nobody having to take the actual responsibility. But I haven't seen. Yeah. I just haven't. I don't watch enough out of the areas of concern that I'm working on, right? Meaning professionally, and so I haven't seen that. But it'd be interesting to talk to the committee staff where the bills go through. I presume they're either judiciary or public safety, and see what they're hearing. Yeah, but also, that was. I mean, I also think that the attention to the commission has just grown significantly, right, over the past few years, even with the interruption of the pandemic. And so it just might be that we were too early for the legislature, and then with the change, so many changes, we might have to go back to seeing if we can figure out who that is.
Tamara, you got your hand up. Thanks, Dion.
Okay, I just wanted to follow up. We, in terms of members who have supported this and provided some leadership here, I wanted to acknowledge Assemblymember Arambula, who's continued to author bills year after year. He's going in for a third try this year to carry legislation that would pretty much pulls from our report verbatim. So there's definitely some leadership in that space. And Commissioner Erner, just noting on the change of leadership, I want to say I think another kind of continuing challenge in this is that the state's efforts to combat labor trafficking have really relied on local leadership, which also has been subject to turnover and term limits too. And so there's been some leadership changes in some of those offices that we brought forward as really leading the state's efforts in this space in different counties and cities. And now under new leadership, they may or may not have prioritized this work in the same way as their predecessors. So that's another challenge for us.
But Mr. Chairman, I do want to add that we have done substantial legislative outreach this past fall and are continuing to do that now. Tamar mentioned that Assemblymember Arambula is making a third try at a bill on this topic, in which we will support that bill. And so we do have some ongoing conversations, and I do think there's some hope for progress here in the current session.
All right. Well, that's good. No, I do recognize, and your reports have been informative with respect to all the offices that you and staff have visited. Well, I hope, David, we give you some sort of sense of what's going on. It's not that we're ignoring it. I do think that part of what Dion points out is there has been a dramatic change. And it's like when you have that many members that have turned over, they're newbies and they're not familiar with the stuff that we've done before. So it's incumbent on us, right, to continue with the outreach. Thank you, Ashley, for that presentation.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if it is the will of the commission then to adopt this report, we would need a motion to that effect.
All right. So is there a motion to adopt the report as presented? I see Commissioner Erner is nodding her head. I take that as a motion. Is there a second? I'll second.
If I may call the roll then, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Vice Chairman.
Aye.
Commissioner Arner.
Aye.
Commissioner Byer.
Aye.
Assemblymember Chen. Commissioner Garcetti.
Aye.
Commissioner Hernandez.
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson.
Aye.
Senator Min. Assemblymember Ortega. Commissioner Sidley.
Aye.
And Senator Wilk. Mr. Chairman, that motion carries.
Thank you. You know, it also occurs to me with respect to this report, if we think about as best we can, those recommendations that could be adopted with a minimum of expense, given the fact that there's a real budget problem, those are the things that probably ought to rise to the top of the list as we
good point.
Promote, you know, a member education.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We will bear that in mind. So if we can move then, if it meets with your approval, to item number 4, which is the meeting and project schedule. The first item here is an update on current studies, and work continues at the staff and subcommittee level on our 3 ongoing studies, CEQA reform, retail theft, and the master plan on aging, where we are anticipating preparing a second report. We already released one report, as the commission knows, but anticipate producing a second report on issues of housing and homelessness in the master plan on aging. So all 3 of those continue at the staff and subcommittee level, and we hope to bring some of those to the full commission at the next meeting on March 28th, although of course we have not yet issued an agenda. The second item, happy to take any questions on that if people wish, or if not, I can move on to the second item, which is the future meeting schedule, and I can handle this very quickly. There are no changes to the schedule you were sent earlier. That schedule is on page 25 of your packets. I believe you've also all been sent calendar invites on all of those dates for the coming year. And as I mentioned, the next meeting is March 28th here in Sacramento. Mr. Chairman, if I may, I see the Commissioner Sidley has raised her hand.
Right.
So Ethan, if you can just go through the rules. If there's a meeting in person, can a commissioner attend via Zoom? I know this is crazy, but I happen to know that September 26th, I'm not available to meet in person. I could possibly meet by Zoom, but I don't know. I don't recall what the new rules are.
Yes, the new rules are in effect. You would be treated at that meeting precisely as all of you are being treated at this meeting. That is to say, we would serve a 24-hour notice at least 24 hours ahead of the meeting that you intend to participate remotely. Your location no longer has to be disclosed. However, you must keep your video on at all times, and you must disclose if anyone over 18 is in the room with you during the meeting. But as long as that is the case, you can participate remotely. So yes, when we get to the in-person meetings, and this will be the case for March 28th, I will be in touch, or Shara will be in touch. We'll figure that out with each of you. For those of you who, if there are any of you who do not intend to participate physically on March 28th, but intend to participate remotely, we'll have to issue that notice ahead of time. For these Zoom meetings, we issue that notice for everyone routinely. So yes, you can participate remotely.
Okay, terrific. I'll do my best to make that meeting then. Thank you.
You have any other further questions with respect to the meeting schedule? Seeing none, I think you can move on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the third item on agenda item 4 is future project selection. And I'm happy to say that we have staff bandwidth at this time to add an additional study topic. As commissioners will recall, at the last business meeting, the commission requested a full scoping memo on artificial intelligence and the use and regulation of artificial intelligence by the state, and briefer scoping memos on homeowners insurance, foster care, and youth suicide. Those documents are all in your packets. The memo on AI begins on page 31. The memo on homeowners insurance begins on page 51. The memo on foster care on page 59, and on youth suicide on page 67. I do want to make one very quick correction to the memo on homeowners insurance, entirely due to my error. On the second page of that memo, on page 52 of the packet, we provide an average California homeowners insurance premium and identify it as per month. It is in fact per year, but the comparison to the national number is still correct. Those are all annual figures. So with that one correction noted, Mr. Chairman, I will turn it back to you for a discussion.
Thank you. Let me just take a moment to express my appreciation to staff and the preparation of those memos. I oftentimes, when I see the caliber and the quality of that work, it makes me think that we've got about 10 or 15 people on staff. And I think we always have to be mindful of the caliber of work that staff puts out is really, I think, extraordinary. I'm never disappointed in the analysis and the depth and the information that we receive in those background memos. And I think it goes a long way towards helping us formulate a direction as a commission. I think there are many other agencies that would be jealous of the quality of work that our staff puts out, and I want to thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Having said that, let's. I think when at the meeting where we discussed potential topics, there seemed to be a fair number of folks that embraced AI, and I do remember that Commissioner Sidley raised the issue of homeowners insurance that has, I think, percolated up high on the list of areas that we ought to consider as well. So having said that, are there any comments or from commissioners with respect to potential topics? Commissioner Hernandez.
Just want to echo the sentiments in terms of the great job that staff has done in these briefs. I know that we talked about AI and there were thoughts just generally, okay, there's such an immense topic, there's things that are more popular, but I think in terms of what staff has provided in terms of viable options, I definitely want to maybe expand on them. There is a conversation now happening around AI and poverty, which is interesting because a lot of times that it's just the tension between workforce and AI is out there. So that is interesting. Not only that, but AI in terms of making government more efficient. I know that is central to kind of this commission's tasks. So definitely want to kind of echo our original conversation about looking at AI and maybe honing in into some of that poverty and efficiency aspect.
Thank you. Commissioner Byer, your hand's up.
Thank you. And I add my voice to the praise for the staff. The fact that we have 4 choices is remarkable, and any of them would be excellent choices. But I go back to criteria that we articulated some years ago in the selection process, and it's a bit of a triage. Is the topic we're going to take up something of high impact on the citizens of California? Is the game worth the candle? That kind of question. And I think artificial intelligence, because of its breadth and depth, probably is the highest impact topic. But I think you can make an argument on home mortgages because of its timeliness and potentially because it could serve a purpose that's unique to Little Hoover and not redundant to work done at the national or international level on AI. I have less confidence that the insurance commissioner will come up with a good solution there. So I think that's an argument for our taking up that topic. But going back to AI, my own personal preference on topics within AI is that we would likely end up with 3, maybe 4 things that we could focus on. At a broader and deeper level, I believe the state should have a consortium of AI purchasers across jurisdictional boundaries, cities, states, and other states, in order to create a market influence on the AI policy front. Right now, the only regulatory scheme that's comprehensive is in Europe, and I do not think we should delegate to the Europeans. On the other hand, Congress does not seem to be acting. So that's an argument for putting together enough market power so that California's rules could become de facto national rules. That's a big topic, complicated. Second, the governor talked about state employees in a relatively narrow way. Personally, I think that's a mistake. We should try and educate everyone in the state. And that means working with the UC, California State University System, community colleges, and secondary schools on making sure that we're not leaving people behind. And this speaks a little bit to Commissioner Hernandez's point. We should try and look at AI from the perspective of the least advantaged and what the effects are going to be, either prepare them to use it or have safeguards to prevent the misuse of their data and the manipulation of their situation in an adverse kind of way. And then lastly, I think the state has a big role in healthcare, and AI in healthcare is the #1 leading topic of relatively immediate implementation based on listening to all the experts. It's being adopted faster and seems to have a lot of promise, but it also has many pitfalls on privacy, autonomy, health equity, inclusion, things like that. So that topic of AI is great. I'm not sure how, Mr. Chairman, you want to divide up the topic, whether we have a rolling set of recommendations or focal points over a period of time. But if we do that, we may push aside all other topics. So personally, I would prefer to have an agenda on AI where we could put other topics in between AI so that we don't spend just the next year on the single topic of AI.
Yep, understood. Thank you. Commissioner Sidley, followed by Commissioner Hernandez.
So again, to the staff, thank you. Thank you for these memos. Much appreciated and tremendous work. I am going to continue my pitch for the insurance. Hearing what everyone's saying, I understand that it's not really #1. I understand, but I'm going to look at it a little bit differently. I think that there are a number of people who are looking at AI. I think that AI is, as we know, a huge issue, and an issue that impacts not just California, but impacts the world, essentially. That being said, what's happening right now in California with insurance, not just homeowners insurance, car insurance, that is a pocketbook issue that is impacting our citizens right now, and they need relief. It is California. People are talking about how it's such an expensive state. People are talking about how they can't afford to live here. If you don't have homeowners insurance, you can't carry a mortgage. And I can tell you from personal experience that the insurance companies are trying to get out of California. They are canceling. They are sending out notices of non-renewal. And these are mom and pop issues. And these are mom and pop issues that literally affect everybody every day. And the panic that comes to our citizens when they get this notice of what do you do? How do I make my next step? I think that the Little Hoover Commission is positioned to make an impact here, and an impact that can be felt more immediately than AI, which I think could swallow us up. Similar to what David Byers said, Commissioner Byers, I think if we do go down the path of AI, we need to not swallow the whale. We need to understand what we're going to look at and what we're not going to look at. But again, I want to reiterate my pitch for insurance. I know how people are suffering with these issues here, and not people who live in a forested area or somewhere like that, but literally in just an urban area where insurance companies are either raising the rates or just saying, I'm not going to insure there. So that continues my pitch for insurance. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sidley. Commissioner Hernandez, followed by Commissioner Garcetti.
I just wanted to clarify that when I talked about AI and poverty, it was more similar to the report in terms of AI alleviating poverty, working on lowering the cost of healthcare, possibly helping with education, streamlining kind of the administrations of programs and bringing down the cost to the state. But I definitely agree that, we do not want to tackle all of AI. So that's why having something more focused, specific, that's align with our mission. And unfortunately, AI is becoming partisan. So that's why, again, it makes sense that a trusted body like this commission looks at the issue and really comes up with solid recommendations on how to move forward.
Thank you, Commissioner Hernandez. Commissioner Garcetti.
I agree with all the comments, and certainly artificial intelligence is a huge, huge issue that's going to play over a number of years. There's no question about that. But I support entirely Commissioner Sidley's comments. This is the thing that's happening right now that is affecting the state. And I think that is our role and mission, is to address something that we can put our hands around right now to a greater extent than we can AI. And I would think, from my point of view, this should be our first priority.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions or comments? Now, let me tell you, yeah, Commissioner Erner.
So after listening to all of you so far, right, the minute we started talking about AI, I thought it was premature, to be honest with you. And then the size of the project, Commissioner Beyer bringing up, right? For me, I mean, do we want to, there are ways to divide it up. The idea of spreading it out over a period of time with a variety of different reports, right? And hopefully synchronizing them in an order that makes sense as we are all trying to grapple with this, looking at the positive role of AI as opposed to doing all of AI. Because when you get into all we read about it, newspaper articles these days is the positive and the negative. The governor's interested in obviously figuring out what the role of the state is in all of this, I think, and how it can be helpful to the state in governing. So from my perspective, how we handle AI, because it could gobble up our time, I think, for more than a year, everybody, because it is such a huge topic and everybody is learning new things. Every day there's something else going on, right, with the leadership in the AI community, let alone whether or not it's a positive force or a negative force or both, whatever. I do want to talk about foster care because, and I really appreciate the document because it gets to what I actually really would like us to take a look at. And it's not, once again, foster care is a large system, even though now, since I chair the Assembly Human Services Committee, caseload's been cut in half. Makes me feel good, to be honest with you, obviously. But it's the new version of foster care that I really want us to look at, which is the reform, the care reform that was put into place in 2015, and all of the counties are struggling with it because it is such a dramatic change, and it's kind of caught up in the housing issue. For example, we need more foster homes, individual foster parents, right, that are well trained, which means we need more homes for people to go to. We don't need large facilities necessarily. So how do you mix that into the housing crisis that we're facing? Because there are a variety of special populations that thrive in communities, meaning in individual living arrangements or with caregivers around them, that kind of thing. And so it's that piece that I'm really interested in seeing us look at. Is what's with CCR, what's going on, what are the barriers, what is working, because there's some places where it is working, what's not working, and are there some recommendations there to help the counties in the state, first of all, figure out what their individual roles are as governments, but then how are they supposed to relate to each other? Because implementation is always difficult. It's easy for the legislature to, I shouldn't say it's easy, but the legislature passes legislation, the governor signs it, and then implementation, what implementation? Whoever looks at it to see what the problems are that they've just created. Because with the good, you always create some things that are difficult and challenging. So that's what I was thinking about in the foster care one. And since we're into our 9th year to 8th year of hopefully beginning to implement the CCR, what are the challenges that the counties are facing?
Thank you, Commissioner Erner. Commissioner Beyer has his hand up.
An idea may not be a great idea, but it would be to actually take on 2 topics, but in a different way. To take on the homeowner's insurance, aiming more for a letter report than a full-blown 50-page document, and on AI, having a hearing that would be essentially an overview hearing on the implementation of the governor's executive order and the reports that he got in November. And I'm thinking 3 witnesses, the person who's the point person for the governor, Berkeley and Stanford, who are the outside academic advisors, and pick 1 or more topics that have already been, where AI has been implemented. So for example, today, the Department of Taxation and Fees is using AI to answer taxpayer questions. So we could get a better sense of how to direct the specific topics within AI by hearing from the governor and then ascertaining what topics we either want to push more work on or make suggestions about other areas the state government could work on that would potentially avoid any overlap with either national or international regulatory efforts.
Thank you, Commissioner Byer. Commissioner Johnson.
Yeah, if I could just add on to what Commissioner Byer just said there, it would be nice to identify where there are gaps in current efforts, and forgive me, staff, if you identified that clearly in your document. I read through it. I didn't see where there was clear gaps in what we could potentially pursue in our efforts that would address what the governor's office and what the legislature is not specifically addressing around AI. And if you recall from our previous meeting, one area that I suggested we not participate was looking at the specific ethical issues around implementation of AI, because there is quite a bit of effort underway there that I think is beyond the scope of what we should pursue. But I would like to know if there are particular gaps that have been identified that we could try to step in and see to help in those gaps.
I see Mr. Harris McCoy has his hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Johnson. So in terms of gaps, I think you're exactly right. I mean, the ethical piece and the regulatory piece, is well in hand, both in the, well, maybe not well in hand, but it's being considered in the legislature and also, through the governor's executive order. In terms of gaps, this is sort of at the forefront of my mind when I was developing the different focus areas. The biggest one to me actually was topic number 4, so relating to public outreach and education, that simply isn't part of the conversation, at least within California state government, as I've sort of seen it. Other areas, there's a lot of talk about protecting vulnerable communities from algorithmic bias, right? Privacy issues, in terms of sort of proactively supporting those communities, right? I mean, that's part of the sort of, spirit of the executive order, for example, but there's not a lot of sort of concrete action being taken in that area. So that's why I came up with topic number 1. Obviously, in all of these topics, finding focus so that we can make, recommendations that are useful and novel and not, being replicated elsewhere. We're going to have to be careful about that. And then, also there's a lot of, how do I want to put this exactly? There's a lot of excitement about what AI and generative AI can do without kind of thinking about, kind of more foundational, preparation that needs to be made first. And so that was the thinking behind AI and data analysis, topic number 3. So for example, I think Commissioner Byer, mentioned an interest in AI and public health, right? And I was just in a web conference yesterday where people from public health were saying, our public health data is not ready to be, analyzed by AI. We need to make, more fundamental infrastructural improvements, and so that's something that, that's the kind of thing that Little Hoover can recommend in order to sort of unleash the power of AI, if you want to put it that way. So those were some of my thoughts in terms of, how we can contribute in an original kind of way.
Okay, let me let me try to frame up what I'm hearing. One of the advantages I think that we have at this point, and I think Ethan, this is correct. We're at full staff now, right?
Correct, Mr. Chairman. Yes.
Okay, so we've and some of what was a limitation on what we could do was in fact because we were not at full staff, and it was really asking a lot of the folks who were in place to actually pile their plate even higher. But I think given the sorts of the nuance and the direction that I'm hearing from the commissioners, that I think, and then given our schedule as looking at the calendar that was presented, I don't know that we couldn't sketch out both. That we can take a look at certain aspects of AI, and I do think that Commissioner Byers' suggestion, coupled with Commissioner Johnson and Hernandez, give us the opportunity to do, a hearing where we are asking the administration and those folks, how's it going, guys? Right? You had an executive order that was fairly detailed. How's it moving forward? What else do you think you need to do? As Daniel just pointed out on the public health, they're saying we've got nothing to put up yet. We're not ready for that. And that was in my conversation with some folks in the AI community. That was one of the things that they said to me. These agencies are being asked to do something that they have not been prepared to do, and they're not going to be able to do it all in the time frame that they've been given. That would be, I think, a way to set the table, because when we have that conversation with the administration, we're going to be able to ask questions about how does that plug into vulnerable communities? What do you need to do in order to fill some of the gaps, identify some of the gaps, which ties back into what I'm hearing from commissioners. At the same time, looking at the issue of insurance, and I served on the insurance committee when I was in the legislature, and there's a number of arguments that are raised by the industry as to why they're having problems, but they weren't necessarily terribly candid or open as to the sources of why they couldn't do certain things. They didn't like to talk about those. And I think I'm hearing from commissioners there's an interest in that. And I think, look, we're blessed in that I look at Commissioner Beyer, Hernandez, and Johnson as three commissioners who've got a fairly deep exposure to AI and that world. And I think we'd be remiss to not take advantage of that experience. And I can sense from what I'm hearing that the insurance issue is one that could benefit from our examination, because, I agree with what was said. I mean, first of all, Mr. Lara is he's going to be done and not very long. We don't really know who's going to come up behind. And as we've seen on the issue of labor trafficking, when you have a change in membership, sometimes the focus gets lost. So this would afford us the opportunity to make sure that there is a focus on the insurance issue. So unless there's some violent opposition to what I've sketched out, I'd like to be able to take the direction from the commission and have a conversation with Ethan and Daniel and whoever else is going to be assigned on the topics of the AI conversation and the insurance, and then formulate something. Commissioner Sidley.
So I just want to voice that in terms of insurance, I think the Little Hoover Commission bringing attention, I don't know that you need, that many hearings, a full day on this, and we might be in a position that we can put out a report that isn't our normal 50 pages, but addresses, I did not realize, Pedro, my apologies, I did not realize that you sat on the committee. So your experience here, I just know what's going on in people's lives. And I am very cognizant of what the Little Hoover Commission does. And so I'm not opposed to doing a shortened schedule. And I know, the insurance was my suggestion. So I just want to be very clear. I'm comfortable with doing a smaller study on that point, but I do think, and I appreciate, Pedro, what you've said, that bringing attention to the issue, and trying to come up with a solution or more exposed and transparent discussion about what is happening out there. Because, you know, it's perfectly fine. Somebody who pays cash, doesn't need a mortgage, and has an insurance problem, they're in a bad way, but that's not the majority of people. And so if you're having trouble, it's truly impacting your life. So, but again, I am very comfortable with a shortened schedule or a shortened report, and not doing their full-blown hearing if that works for this topic. So thanks.
Of course, thank you. Ethan, your thoughts?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think that we could, as I understand the way you sketched out this idea, it would be that at the staff and subcommittee level, and working with you as the chair, that we would come up with some sort of a plan, given our staff capacity, to pursue both AI and homeowners insurance. There might need to be something would have to be first on March 28th when we meet in person. I do anticipate a fairly lengthy business meeting, actually, but we would certainly use that date for a hearing. So one of those topics would have to be first, but we could pursue both AI and homeowners insurance as best as our staff bandwidth allows, and attempt to do homeowners insurance in a relatively compressed schedule. So if that's the guidance that I hear thus far from the commission, although I see Commissioner Aroner has raised her hand.
Commissioner Aroner has her hand up.
Yeah, following up on the timing of it, I guess I agree with Janet that we can, that the homeowners, because we're focusing on homeowners insurance, we're not looking at the entire insurance world, if I understand it correctly. That I don't see us doing 4 hearings or even 3. I mean, I think we could do 1 hearing, right, and come up with enough, because it's being focused on in so many areas at this point, right? Because as Janice said, people are being affected right now, right? People are losing their insurance policies right now. They're being notified on a regular basis. And so, and I guess maybe the other thing to put in that hearing is about the state insurance pool, you know, and what it does, whatever it's called, yeah. So that we get a sense of, you know, is that working or not working? Is it? All I ever hear is that it's incredibly expensive, and so what do moderately income folks do when they're notified they're losing their insurance, and they look at the state and go, I can't afford that. And so I'd like to see that hearing on the I think that would be a good one to do on the 28th, because I think AI has so many complexities to it, and I'd like to hear from staff before we jump into that one. How do they see handling it? Because I liked Commissioner Byer's idea of kind of spacing it out so that other studies don't get pushed off because the AI conversation goes on for so long, because there's so much to it.
Okay. Well, we can, Mr. Chairman, just briefly in response to that, we certainly can spread out AI over a period of time and produce multiple shorter reports on that topic. I'm an advocate of short reports, as you know, so we can certainly do that. There is still this question of which we would sort of start with, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's I think
another party is heard from.
That's my 8-pound Chihuahua guard dog.
Oh.
So do you have to notify if a dog is present in addition to people over 18?
It's a non-voting dog.
Right.
So let me talk with Ethan about how we can tee this up, but it's pretty clear it's going to be one or the other. Commissioner Sidley.
I was going to say, I think it's best, Pedro, if you and Ethan work through this. Ethan has a much better idea of what also is going to be happening on the 28th and whether or not that's going to take up a lot of time. And so, you know, I completely defer to the two of you. If we just have somebody from the governor's office come in and talk about the executive order on the 28th and sort of just get that in a framework, and then we do something else. But again, you guys know best what's actually on the plate, so I defer to you.
Okay. Great. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, again, for a thoughtful examination of our direction. And I guess with that, we can go to implementation.
I believe we can, Mr. Chairman. So, and the last two items can be relatively brief, I think, today. Item number 5 on the agenda is the implementation and impact report on page 76. That list on page 76 is simply a list of media coverage, but the more substantial issue on implementation not addressed in the written materials is that we have had contact and discussion with a number of legislative offices about introduction of multiple bills that would implement multiple reports, multiple recommendations from various reports. For whatever reason, in many cases this year, those authors are amending that language into other vehicles, and they have not yet actually done that. And so therefore, we're not in a position where we can officially support bills or really discuss those efforts. I think when offices have spoken to us in confidence, in some cases they're moving forward right now. We got word last night that one office is moving forward, for instance, and has now introduced a bill. But what I would say really on implementation is that I think we're having discussions on quite a number of bills that would implement recommendations. We hope to support those bills, and I would hope to report back to the commission with actual bill numbers, support letters, more details at the March 28th business meeting.
Okay. Commissioner Byer has his hand up.
Yeah, Ethan, I have two different questions in terms of implementation. What lessons have we learned about what's effective in getting things done? And that's kind of the two parts are, as I understand it, many legislators have decided now to look for trailer bills as opposed to going through the ordinary legislative process. Does that change our implementation effort? And second, and relatedly, under the chair's leadership and your leadership, Ethan, we've done a lot more in terms of blog posts and social media. I'm wondering how that's going and whether there are other tools or tactics that could be used, different outreach techniques. I know in the past we've used webinars. Sort of what works? What's the ratio of effort to outcome?
So to take the second question first, if I may, Commissioner Byer, I think that we have increased over the last few years these various methods. You mentioned all the ones I would mention: blog posts, social media, webinars. We will continue to work on those. We're going to discuss briefly in a bit that we're redesigning the website. I think there will be substantially more functionality to the new website in terms of some of those kinds of additional tools. I think, however, what works actually the best is perhaps the most time-consuming method, but that is simply meeting with individual legislative offices, informing them, to be honest, pitching them our recommendations and ideas, and then seeing what bills they're interested in introducing. And that's a sort of back and forth process. We meet with the staff, they'll go to the member, they'll come back. So I think those individual meetings are what has actually moved the ball the most in terms of bill introductions. So if that answers your first question, or your second question, rather, I apologize. I don't know if...
The first one was about whether there have been changes in legislative tactics that we need to be aware of. The trailer bill vehicle as opposed to straightforward legislative process. You have a bill, introduction of a bill, you have a hearing, it's considered separately by a committee. That old school technique seems to be falling by the wayside in the legislature, but I could be wrong about that.
Yes. Well, the reason I paused actually is I saw Commissioner Hernandez raised his hand. I didn't know if the chairman wanted to recognize him now or wait until but I'll go ahead and answer the trailer bill question now. So the trailer bill process is really under the control of the governor's office. They introduced those trailer bills to implement the budget, or I see Commissioner Hernandez shaking his head, but under, maybe not control is the right word, but the trailer bill process, and I'm going to defer to the three members, the former members of the legislature who are here and former staff members who are here. The trailer bill process, I would say, is more popular, let me put it this way, with the governor's office than it is often with the legislature. And the legislature has, how shall I say, a complex relationship with the trailer bill process, sometimes positive, sometimes negative. it's harder for us to anticipate what trailer bills will be introduced at this point in the session well ahead of time. And so at this point in the session, I would say that actually these individual meetings that I mentioned that work on more sort of traditional bill introduction methods are what is most productive at this point. Later on, when we get to the budget and then the trailer bills, there are often, as a number of the commissioners know, there are often policy issues addressed in trailer bills, but it's very difficult to predict those now.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner Hernandez.
No, this is great. Ethan, you just reminded me of a conversation we had also in terms of maximizing our opportunity to educate elected officials and their staff, the idea of possibly hosting luncheon briefings in terms of bringing in additional folks and just educating them not only on the specific issues, but overall Little Hoover. I don't know if that's also on the table in terms of possible efforts.
Yes, it is, Commissioner Hernandez, and I want to circle back with you on that. That is somewhat similar to the webinars that we have hosted. However, if we do it in person and provide them free food, more people are likely to attend. So we have done some of those in the past. We transitioned to the webinars during the pandemic and started doing a webinar for every report that was issued. I think now we're at a point where we can probably do a mix of webinars and in-person briefings. So I think that we can discuss that further, and I do want to circle back with you. But yeah, almost any outreach to staff, whether it's through a webinar, in person, through an individual meeting with a given office, those are highly productive, I think.
Thank you. Commissioner Aaron.
I mean, I really, it's the one-on-one is really important, right? Whether or not it's a commissioner reaching out to a certain legislator to say, I'd like to give you a heads up on a report we're doing, and I've noticed that you might be interested in the topic, right? That's incredibly valuable. I think it's kind of like when they ask us to come and testify on a bill, right? They're serious at that point, and they want to see what they can do. Having said that, the trailer bills issue is a whole other issue, everybody, because first of all, most legislators don't work on the budget. And I've never heard a candidate ever say, I'm running for office because I want to solve this. I want to work on the state budget. Not unless you all know something I don't know. I've never heard a candidate say that. So the number of people that actually work on the budget and understand the budget, okay, are few out of the 120. The trailer bills, I think, as you all know, trail the budget. So they are related to implementing the Budget Act, making the statutory changes that need to happen. All right. For budget staff, right, the staff who has to do all of the work, many times they will come back to a potential author who's saying to them that they would like to use the trailer bill as a way to do something. And they'll say, wait a minute, the policy committees have never heard that item, right? You really need to move a bill. And then if you want to come and use the trailer, because it's the fastest way to get something to the governor, right? Legislation takes 7 steps, trailer bill is 2 steps if you get both sides to agree. Okay, and so, but very few members, and particularly with the newness of the legislature, right, meaning the members themselves, very few understand all of those processes. They just don't. And so, and also in all years this year, there's going to be very little going into trailer bills that the governor write, because normally unless somebody's spending money or something, they've already been told don't put in legislation that's going to cost anything because it's going to be held in the probes, right? And that's what they're saying back to every advocate that walks into their office and says, will you carry my bill? Because that's the experience I'm having in that world right now, right? It's just, I'm sorry, can't do anything that's going to be praised at, saying that it cost over. I bet you the suspense thing goes down to 0 this year, right? It used to be 150,000, then it went to 50. I'll bet you if you cost $1, you're not moving out of the suspense file. You're just not, because they've all bought the lemonade that we are $38 billion down, and that's only in the first year, and from there we go. It gets worse. So I wish we could use the trailer bill stuff for some of our stuff, but. This is not the year to be, spending our time on that. It really is, can we get authors to carry some legislation? And as you all know, right, sometimes it takes years to get that bill passed. They keep reintroducing it, changing one word or another. until there's enough education in the legislature, let alone in the administration, that this would be a good change. So.
Thank you, Commissioner Henner. Yeah, and for Commissioner Beyer and some others who are not that familiar with budget trailer bills, what Dion described is more or less the traditional way in which a trailer bill was applied. What we have seen with this administration is an expanded use of trailer bills that carry with them policy. And there's been some criticism. I'm trying to remember the columnist's name, just wrote it a couple days ago about how trailer bills have now become one of the ways that the administration uses to move forward policy differently than what's been done in the past.
Yeah.
Vice Chair Cannella, I can't imagine going to a meeting without hearing your voice. So
I will offer this. On trailer bills, as a member of the minority party, I hated them. If I was in the majority party, I would love them. So.
Very good. All right. How about, can we move on to the update of the website?
I believe that we can, Mr. Chairman, and that can be a fairly brief item. And Allie has been in charge of the website redesign project, and so I'll just ask her to briefly update you on that.
Hello, Allie. Long time no see.
Hello, Commissioners. So we are getting very close to being able to launch the new website. Really what we're waiting for is just finalizing new content. Once we go live with the new site, we want to make sure that we have all new items that we can put on our home screen. So that would be hopefully the labor trafficking report. We'll get that formatted. The other couple of reports that we've just released, along with some blog posts and other items. So hoping for the week, either maybe late next week or early the following week.
Wonderful. And I should mention, in terms of outreach, Ethan and I are working on some meetings, trying to put together some meetings for me over in the Capitol the day before our March meeting. So I suspect that we'll have some success with that.
I believe so, Mr. Chairman. So we'll continue that. And as I said, I think that I will have more bills to update the commission on March 28th. So,
all right.
And with that, Mr. Chairman, I believe we have actually fairly quickly completed today's agenda. The next meeting, as I mentioned, is March 28th in person here in Sacramento. I did mention in an email to commissioners, and I know a number of you have done so already, but if you can follow up with Shara relatively quickly in terms of travel plans, that would be helpful. The state is switching travel vendors, and we don't know how well that will go. So if you can make your travel plans relatively soon. And other than that, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back to you, but I think we've completed the agenda.
Well, I've always maintained that I love working with people who are smarter than I am, because the meetings run well, we have vigorous conversations, and things just seem to work out better. So thank you all very much. Happy Valentine's Day. We'll be together soon. See you later.
Thank you.